Hey, MBA hopefuls, we are live on the air with MBA Waves. This week we are talking about, I'm forgetting what we're talking about. We're talking about personal branding. And I'm so excited to have, I guess, what we have with us today. But first, MBA Waves, just so you know, is a weekly vidcast talking all things business and education, streaming live every single Tuesday on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Bringing you tons of tips to help you get into top ranked MBA and master's programs and getting you up close and personal with many of the business schools that we host on the show, where you can get all your questions answered. If you like this week's episode, don't forget to give us a like and for sure subscribe, the subscribe button on the YouTube channel. Today on episode 100, it is our 100th birthday today. We are celebrating 2 years of MBA Waves. And again, we're talking about all things personal branding. We're going to get into exactly what that is, personal branding on paper, in person, and in pixels. But before we begin, I want to introduce our guests and as well as my fellow co-hosts on MBA Waves. I'm going to start with Bara Sapir. How you doing, Bara?
Hello, happy 100.
Yeah,
I'm so excited. I can't believe it's been 2 years. Unbelievable.
Incredible. And we still have not yet met in person, but we're about to very soon at the AGAT conference this June, in a month from today. All right, next up, at MBA Waves veteran, Petia Whitmore. I'm combining your names. Wow, I think I just might have married you two.
I can't believe that this is happening because our guests probably don't know this and they may not care, but we collectively, the three of us, conceived this thing 2 years ago, if you can believe it. And here it is, still going strong. So super excited to be here. Petia Whitmore. The way I introduce myself is a former dean of MBA admissions, now on a mission of creating more MBA success stories.
Love it. And MBA Waves was absolutely born out of COVID, right? We were all locked up at home, sipping wine in our PJs, and we wanted to connect. We wanted to meet people. We wanted to put ourselves out there, and this is what happened. And we're still going strong. All right. All right. Let's introduce some of our guests. Oh, I'm forgetting Krithika. Hello, Krithika, my dear. How are you?
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here and part of the 100th episode. And as I say, this is about personal branding. So I'm on my mission to help 1 million craft their dream careers.
Love it. Lofty goal, but I'm sure you're going to do it, Krithika. And last but not least, we have Hillary Schubach. How are you? Am I pronouncing your name right?
It's Hillary Schubach, and I am dialing in here from Santa Monica, sunny Santa Monica, California. And I'm the founder and president of Shine MBA Admissions Consulting. I'm happy to help you celebrate 100.
Thanks. Love it. I love that you're dialing in. I didn't even know that was possible anymore. That's cool.
Please.
All right. So without further ado, we're 2 minutes in. Let's talk about personal branding. How would you define one's personal brand, like more broadly speaking? And whoever wants to take that, of course, giving deference to our guests this week, whoever wants to take that away, Petia or Hillary, how would you define your personal brand?
I can start. For me, personal brand is really about what you're known for. You know, whether you're being known for being the best at something, or being known for your strong opinions on a topic or your expertise. It's something that gives people a reason to ask for you by name.
I love that. That's great. Concise. Petia, what's your definition?
I'll add to this and say that for the purposes of our MBA candidates who are in the audience, the MBA hopefuls, as you and I call them, I think that personal branding could be construed as the set of messages that you're sending about yourself that communicate who are you going to be when you show up on campus and who are you going to be down the road, so that the schools know who they're bringing into their brand, right? What kind of student, what kind of alum are you going to be? So personal branding to me is the messages that you're sending to the MBA admissions committee about how are you going to show up on campus.
Thank you, Petia. And you really bring up a very important point about how that when you join an MBA program or a company, you are becoming part of their brand. So they're very careful about who they welcome into that. In a way, it is like a marriage of two brands, but times like however many tens of thousands of people have done that. Bara, do you have a definition you want to share? Your definition of personal branding?
You know what I'm actually thinking about is that I suspect
that I'm
thinking about, and I'm here I am out west. I'm thinking about that branding probably originally actually was the branding, right? Is when they took a hot poke
Oh yeah.
thing and put it into an animal in order to say, this is my animal. This is what what belongs to me. But it was done from the outside to something else, right? Whereas personal branding is that you're kind of doing it, like, are you doing it to yourself, or are you actually putting it out there so people know what that brand is? And I think that that's an interesting process, because what that reciprocal relationship that you were just talking about, Eric, is really that very same thing. That branding is that you're putting your brand onto the school with whatever you do, and the school is putting their brand on you. And so, it's interesting because when I think about political leaders and where they went to school, I just often wonder how that affects the schools that they have attended.
In
Just
various ways.
You might be thinking of right there. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Krithika, what about you?
I think like personal branding is not in relation to something else. It's just like all about yourself. But in the context of the MBA admissions world, I would say that it is a vehicle for you to show authenticity. Everyone talks about bring your authentic self and show your authentic personality and so on. I think personal branding is the vehicle for you to do that. And like how everyone said, to add to that, personal branding would be one way of not only like talking about the messages that you want to share with the others, but also to showcase what you really have and what you can offer to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So since no one asked me, I'll share what I think anyway about personal branding. I've often defined it as the sum total of how you present yourself, your values, and your value to the world. And as I like to say, on paper, in person, and in pixels. And I'm pretty sure you can guess what I mean by that, right? On papers, in the MBA context, often your CV. In person, well, perhaps that's at an MBA fair, a campus visit, perhaps an interview. It could be an alumni chat, a coffee chat, or alumni cocktail if you've attended one of those. And of course, in pixels, well, what we're doing right now could be a webinar, could be an online MBA fair, or your video interview. So there's a lot of ways that you can present yourself. I want to get into that today, just how you can maximize the potential of your personal brand in the process of applying for an MBA or a master's program. So that said, I wanted to ask the question to you all: what comparisons would you make between a personal brand and brands that we all know and love, or even hate today? Whoever wants to take that.
I just want to hop on real quick because this is a great segue. And I actually probably won't have very much to say about personal branding today necessarily, but Maya Angelou said that we often don't remember what people do or say or mean. I'm totally taking poetic license here, but how they make us feel.
Absolutely.
And I think that the personal brand, especially for MBA students, I think that it's super important because it is what's lasting, how people feel when they encounter you, whether that is on paper, in person, or in pixels, and what is the lasting piece. So, I think that when you think about some of the advertising we did for this, I think there was Louis Vuitton and there was Starbucks and there was McDonald's. Those all make us feel really different when we see them. So I do think that that's very different than personal brand, right? And, it's on brand for me to do dog rescue, right? That's on Bara brand. So, but I'm really interested actually in hearing the experts here that work on essays and helping people to define what personal brand is versus something that has a corporate, more solid image.
And you don't downplay yourself too much, Bara. You even though you're not doing MBA admission strategy, you're doing test prep. I think you have a good handle on branding, I would say. Petia, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
I actually really like the take that Bara had, and thinking about branding in this context is very interesting. And here's what I'm going to say. Because of that long-term nature of the relationship of who the schools are going to invite into their brand, that actually makes it really hard to think about your branding in terms of making parallels to how the big brands brand themselves. And my background many years ago, almost like a different life ago, used to be in advertising. And actually McDonald's was a brand that I introduced to the Eastern European market. It was very interesting to see how differently it was positioned there than here. But the biggest thing about personal branding as it relates to the MBA application process is that you can't simply make statements about yourself. It's not about taglines because again, the schools are very carefully selecting candidates who actually have a track record behind what they're claiming about themselves. So that's what makes it really tricky. So the candidates who are really successful when it comes from a personal branding perspective are not the ones who brand themselves like, I'm an innovative leader with unparalleled leadership track record. Like that statement doesn't get you very far. But being able to show actions that convey that message, that's the biggest difference when it comes to personal branding in MBA admission from my experience.
Absolutely. Hillary, did you want to?
Somebody mentioned earlier authenticity, and that was definitely on my list of things that, absolutely makes a difference. Like I think you can think through what I hate to say the word tagline is, but I really think that you can think through like, what do I stand for, and try to drill that down to some concise statement or statements. But it absolutely requires you to have that, that backup, like show how you then have had an impact or made contributions in those areas. And that's why I love the resume as a piece of real estate on the application process. In the application process, it's sometimes undervalued, I think, but I find it to be such a good real estate to show off all the stuff you've done that can be aligned with your brand. And then,
I totally agree. And I definitely want to focus some time on the resume. I want to give Krithika a chance to respond if she wants to, and then we can pivot back to the CV or resume.
Yeah. So when you were like referring to some of the other brands, what came to mind is how we have the small promotions and campaigns and other things that happen in the corporate branding. That's something that you should do for your personal branding as well. And that therein lies some kind of similarity. And what those promotions would be is like probably definitely showcasing what you have done and providing evidence for all the statements, like how both Hillary and Petia had mentioned. So I would say that when you think of the, probably the similarity between the branding of both corporate versus personal, it is about how you can promote yourself as well.
Can I talk to the corporate brand piece a little bit, or the brands we know and love piece, if you'd like me to? Because
I would love it.
I came from a branding background. So I have this funny background of, I started my career in branding humans. I worked in sports marketing at a sports agency doing Jerry Maguire kind of stuff. And I wrote all my essays about that. And then after business school, I went on to CPG, consumer packaged goods, and worked at companies like Kraft Foods and Unilever. And literally I found one of my old, branding exercises from when I worked on Ragu pasta sauce. And then at a branding agency after that. And it's like, I absolutely incorporate some of those same elements that we worked on in these exercises. That's why I pulled it out. It's like, I do a branding exercise with our clients as part of our work. And I take pieces from the branding process that we would do for any product and apply it to humans, like what's your mission and vision? I kind of think of that like your short and long-term goals. What's your mission and vision? What are your values? And then, think through like your personality, your brand personality. And then of course, points of differentiation is a big part of a brand positioning exercise. And so I do think there's a lot to be taken. Like think about the difference between like Kim Kardashian and Gwyneth Paltrow's brands, or like more technical, like a Apple versus HP, two computers, two really different ways of going about it, and two very different feelings about it. And both strong competitors, both have a place in the MBA class, so to speak. So, I kind of like doing some of the foundational branding stuff, even if you're applying it to a person applying to business school.
Absolutely.
And if I can add to that, Eric, Hillary, you're absolutely right. And I'm actually a proponent even of the tagline. I think that it's a really good thing to have a tagline internally to guide your set of messages, because one thing that sometimes I feel candidates underappreciate is the fact that you can be authentic, but being authentic doesn't mean that you're going to be kind of unfiltered or uncurated. I mean, there's so many authentic facets of you, right? I mean, I'm a very authentic espresso lover. Do I put this in my MBA application? Maybe, maybe not, right? So you still have to be authentic, but you have to choose which parts of you to show up in various places of the application. And having a tagline and an exercise like what you described helps you make the right choices. Like what particular components, what features, what brand attributes are you choosing to sort of run on a platform of?
Absolutely.
And I'm just gonna hop onto what Petia said here. She just nailed it by saying personal branding is all about curation.
Mhm.
And exactly like curating and then showing what you want to show and share.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in
Again,
a parallel,
the Museum of Modern Art, they don't put every single painting they have on display at all times. They curate it in terms of maybe the time of year or what's going on in current events. It's like you absolutely pick and choose, you cherry pick. Not to say that you're not authentic by doing so, but it made me think of Brene Brown, and she speaks a lot about vulnerability and authenticity, and that, she's now applying this to very much the business world. I'm trying to remember the name of her book that speaks about this.
The Alice
But
of
in any
Heart?
case, it's another one. She's got a few books out there. The woman is very impressive. I'm a fan. But there was a bit of backlash when she was talking about being authentic in the workplace, and people were saying like, "Oh, I told my boss that I did XYZ over the weekend, and like now I'm fired." I was like, "No, she didn't mean be unfiltered," as Petia said. I think it was Petia who said that. So absolutely, it is curating and choosing wisely what you want to have come across, and being authentic with what you share does not mean sharing every single thing.
I mean, so if I can use an example, this actually reminds me, a few years ago, someone came to me after not being successful in the MBA application process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing a postmortem of, I think it was Harvard essays, and there was this lovely story about a breakup with a girlfriend and this and that, and there were like some takeaways, there were some lessons learned, but I said, like, essentially, what message were you sending with this essay? What did you want the takeaway to be? What was the so what of the story? He's like, well, I mean, I felt that I need to lean in the direction of authenticity. Great. But what do you want them to learn about you?
Right.
this reminds me,
right?
This reminds me exactly with what you're saying. We often talk in MBA Waves about how business school reflects real life in a certain way, but it's just a different channel, right? There's all these different channels, and it's like online dating, right? Like, what are you going to put on your online dating profile? You're not going to necessarily get in really deep about espresso or about a breakup necessarily.
Unless I'm looking to date a barista.
Exactly, right? But in the same way, if you're wanting to put yourself out there in a way that the business schools are going to see your leadership, your empathy, your authenticity, and a dating profile might be how you are adventurous and how you're open to short-term or long-term, whatever it is. It's all about knowing your audience, because ultimately we're branding all the time. When you meet a friend, you don't, you meet someone new, you don't say, hey, I want to tell you I'm really loyal, I'm really fun, and I like to spend time going to the movies. Like, it's the doing, it's the doing that someone learns about who you are. And these, I would imagine these essays really have to demonstrate it and move people to see it.
So if I can say one thing, probably a couple of weeks ago, I was working on something for the group coaching service that I'm running. And I ended up asking ChatGPT to take the US News and World Report ranking and to take the top 25 schools, I think it was, and to tease out the most commonly used words from the missions of these schools, and to synthesize that, to give me the words, and also synthesize sort of like, what is the mission, the overarching general mission of business schools. And it ended up being MBA programs focus on producing well-rounded ethical leaders who can drive innovation and growth in the business world. And common themes include leadership, ethics, innovation, excellence, global perspective, entrepreneurship, professional development, and social responsibility. So this is where the curation happens, right? It didn't mention espresso lovers. It also didn't mention people with an average GMAT of 750, right? So this is kind of how I think of personal branding when it comes to.
But that is excellence, right? A GMAT score of 750.
It is excellence. Yes, the GMAT is excellence. Absolutely true.
You know, I want to also just throw in there. Bara brought up the importance of knowing your audience, and I think without a doubt, authenticity is key, without a doubt. And unlike in online dating, in online dating, you can say, I'm me and hear me roar, and I will find somebody that likes me for me. But the reality is we are applying to business school, and you should not craft your message to what you think they want to hear. They say this over and over. It has to be your authentic story. But at the same time, like, you can turn an espresso-oriented story into a really creative and interesting, essay for business school, provided that it has mature and applicable and relevant messages ultimately.
Right. And the right takeaway, right reason why you're telling them the espresso story. Absolutely.
Yeah. And they make some of the best stories. I mean, frankly, I was a cheerleader in college, and my mom was reading my essays, and she was like, you are not going to write about cheerleading. And I was like, I am going to write about cheerleading, because it was a great leadership story. It was a failure leadership story, and it was good, and it worked, for me. But I immediately took that goofy, topic and turned it into a very applicable, relevant story that had resounding lessons for higher level leadership. And I showed how I took that into the then professional world and learned from that. And so it doesn't matter, as long as you get there and that it is relevant.
The takeaway and the so what from the essay. I mean, I'm sure, Hillary, you've seen it. There's a famous essay that circulates around, I think Poets and Quants published it, where a candidate write about the 3 times she cried at work, right? I mean, on the surface, it's kind of like, really? But when you read it, it's all about what you just said, sort of like the takeaways and what message, why does it matter? And why are you telling me these particular 3 things, or whatever it might be?
Yeah.
Yeah, it has to be relevant, obviously. And you were getting into some of the things that what make a great MBA story. And, first of all, just backing up and really applying this whole branding concept to an MBA application, besides the testing part, which has its purpose, the elements that are going to really take into account with your application, if you think about it, like, say, working backwards, like your interview, there's your references, which aren't written by you. So you have very little influence on how that's going to go. Your essays, which are absolutely very much about branding, and even your CV. So those 3 things, the CV, essays, and interview, and CV or resume, as you want to say, depending on where you're from, are the 3 major areas, more formal or official areas you can have a real impact on delivering on your personal brand. But also I would argue there's a lot of these, just to make a quick mention, some of these other areas where you have an opportunity to reinforce what your personal brand is, right? And that could be, alumni coffee chats, that could be even in an email exchange, or conversations you have by phone with the recruiter or with the admissions person, that you have an opportunity. They're on the phone, right? Maybe you're asking a specific question about a course or a career services thing or whatever isn't already clear on their website. And it's an opportunity to just drop something that reinforces that message you've already sent via your CV. So bringing up the CV, I wanted to give Hillary, because she seemed really excited to talk about the resume or CV.
I do love resumes.
How this can really reflect your personal brand. And I'll just say one thing at the beginning. I see it as kind of like the letterhead of your company, right? That part, that header at the top, that is like your first, bam, your brand right there, right? Like the font you choose, the way you lay out, all the key contact information, identity information that you would include in the header. And then there's everything else, right? There's the experiences, the education, skills, and so forth. So take it away, Hillary, with your view on the resume or CV as a branding opportunity.
Okay, so many things. I think one I'll mention is refers back to a point that I was getting to earlier, which is that, it's one thing to say that you're passionate about something, or, tell your authentic story, but then you do have to have those points of proof. And Petia mentioned too, like, what have you done to actually demonstrate that these are areas that you're passionate about, or, even if it's a career change, like I want to go into healthcare, and today I'm in accounting, but I want to go into healthcare. You can use your resume to show the steps you've taken already toward transitioning into that career, trajectory, whether it's joining a association for young professionals in healthcare. And you can just mention that they're not going to get a lot of real estate in your essay, I'm sure, but you could get them into your resume in a little tiny way. So whether it's using the bullets to show off your added value, accomplishments, or initiatives, and showing off certain attributes you have around that, in that way, or whether it's showing certain associations you have, activities you participated in, that's the other way. And then even just that last little personal interest line. And I have so many people that mention coffee, Petia. I'm still going to stick to the fact that you can get anything in there. And as I actually love to make it kind of creative when that candidate's personality, when it's a fit for that personality. Like sometimes they'll just say avid semi-professional dog trainer or something goofy, not instead of just saying dogs, like we'll dig into what aspect of dogs they're passionate about, and then, put it in a fun way there that makes that reader say, I'd love to talk to that person and ask them that in my interview.
I mean, Hillary, I'm going to make a confession. So in my life as Dean of MBA Admissions, when I used to interview towards the end of my time as Dean of Admissions, I was interviewing less and less because obviously I had an office to run and a huge team and all of this, but I still wanted to keep my hands in the applicant pool a little bit because it's just so exciting to meet with the candidates and get to know them. So when they would come in for in-person interviews, I would ask them if they wanted a cup of coffee. And if they said no, I'd say, oh, well, I can't admit you. I only admit coffee lovers because I'm a coffee addict. So I'm really, really sorry. And obviously for a second, you see this scared look on their face. So I'm actually all for coffee in the MBA admissions process. So I love that you're running with that theme.
Sounds like you've had some tonight, Petia.
I am fully fueled up. I call coffee the fuel of all MBA students. So where.
Right? I'm with you on that. And I love coffee as well.
Maybe we should change your brand to My MBA Bean, not My MBA Path.
So I'm already plotting.
You can call Bara's Mind Brew.
Yeah, I've been plotting 10 ways how Petia can use her espresso lover, into the MBA, essays.
My personal tagline, speaking of personal branding, is I used to call for years myself. I think on Twitter it still says that I say that I'm espresso and entrepreneurship fueled.
Nice.
This is case in point. Like if I were coming up with Petia's personal brand right now and I could, have 10 things, maybe the very last one would be something about this woman loves coffee, because we couldn't miss this. This is the whole point. Sometimes there's just some themes that are, whether they're fun or lighthearted or have a higher purpose. Like if you can remember somebody in some way, it gives somebody a reason to think, I remember Bara, I remember this person in the process. They made a connection with me, or they showed that they're likable, or, and it's just about trying to be memorable, not in an inappropriate or, immature way. Right. It's, that's very important, but it's just not fading into the background of a very competitive.
Yeah. Standing out, but also being human. People that resonates with people. If you can tell a story, something anecdotal from your childhood or from work or back at university that shaped you, or that just is an aspect of you that's gives you your unique color, your uniqueness. In Petia's case, it would be a rich mocha brown. Can we get into what makes for a great MBA story in essays? I think this is an area where you have a real opportunity to develop that story. Right? About you, to develop your brand in prose form, not just bullet points. So who wants to tackle that one? Krithika or Petia?
I'll put Krithika on the spot.
Oh, okay. So I can go first. I think the stories that resonate with me are, again, which speak to what made people choose those paths in their life before, how they have progressed with their career, and all those inflection points that you have, which made you. So that could be values, that could be setbacks, that could be even accomplishments or challenges they won, the successes. So it's just knowing their story and those highlights, which for me make an authentic MBA story. And I feel that people don't put a lot of effort into it. And I would start from the resume. So to me, the resume, like you said, it's giving us a lot of points by which I can connect with the person. And the essays are just amplifying it. and then giving us a better picture of who the person is and why they're a good fit for the particular program to which they're applying.
Yeah, I mean,
They might have a
like the
different
movie
perspective.
poster, Krithika, right? And then the essays are like, okay, now I'm watching the episodes, or at least reading the transcripts of the episodes. Absolutely.
Petia, did you want to add to that, or agree or disagree? Or
Here's how I think about MBA story as it relates to essays. In its simplest form, to me, an MBA story is about where have you been, where are you going, how the MBA serves as a bridge. But the thing is, within those three components, there are so many different parts, different anecdotes, different little snippets or vignettes from your past that you can choose. So it's going to be very highly tailored to what question you're asking. I'm being, I guess, too practical perhaps here. But what makes for a good story is starting with an ending in mind. So again, what are the takeaways? Like after I read this story, sort of what do you want me to have learned about you? That of course relates to the question that you're answering, and how what I have learned about you will help you stand out. Because the thing about MBA admission is, as we all know, there are two phases of it: evaluation and selection. Evaluation determines who's admissible, but even the highest ranked and most selective schools, after they go through the evaluation process for the entire pool of candidates, easily half of them are admissible. So how does the selection happen? That's where the storytelling really matters, because you want to tell a story that excites the MBA admissions committee about the possibility of inviting you to the class. So it happens through anecdotes that communicate the qualities, the personal branding, the brand features that you've decided that you're going to go forward with, and makes them come to life, makes them vivid.
I'll just layer on some less practical and more just storytelling oriented thoughts. When I get people started on the essay writing process, I just remind them of, the admissions officer is, they've read their whatever numberth essay of the night, and they're tired, and trying to get through one more, and then they open yours, and it's got an interesting opening, and it's got that, it's again professionally mature but meaningful little hook in some way that makes them want to keep reading. And so it's not forbidden, even though it's business school and it seems like a more conservative kind of a graduate school admissions process. It is not. We encourage you to engage this poor, weary reader by finding beauty in the English language and using interesting wording where relevant, even just for an opening line, and getting excited about your own protagonist in the story, which is you. If you can root for your own success, they're going to root for your success. And just having that enthusiasm around the path that you're looking to head in and all that you're going to accomplish in the world, and being clear on that impact, not just what you want to do, but like that impact, that higher purpose for why you want to do that, to change, to do something positive in that sector, or for that organization, or for one person in this world, when you graduate. I think that's the kind of stuff that really adds that next layer of storytelling.
Oh, you're so right, Hillary. I mean, and that's why we're saying a story. We're not using the word essay per se, right? We're talking about a story here. There's a reason for that. A story, like you said, has a protagonist, a set of characters, some sort of a development, right? A plot. And you have to make it be a story, as opposed to kind of like just some collection of statements that don't tell a story. So I'm absolutely with you in terms of make it interesting, make it vivid, make it worth reading. I mean, it's your story. I'm yet to meet a candidate, I'm sure that's true of everyone on this call, that doesn't have something super interesting about them, something super exciting that when I speak with, I'm like, oh my goodness, I mean, I would have loved to read your story in an MBA admissions essay. So thinking about it from that perspective, how does it really flow as a story? Why is it interesting? Why is it engaging? Is super important. I mean, think about it. Like, Hillary, you're an HBS grad, right? Like, what are cases, the HBS cases? They're a story, aren't they?
100% story. Yeah.
With a set of characters in business, like some plots and twists, a little bit of mystery, right? So that then the students can sort of decide what happened. So as humans, we're wired to respond to story.
I mean, for like 95% of human history, that is how wisdom and everything has been passed on, through telling stories, like around a campfire or something. And it's still, we are, as you said, hardwired for that. So that is how we connect with people.
There's a quote, sorry, because I'm really passionate about that particular quote. Jonathan Gottschall, he's a historian, an anthropologist, and an author. And he has this quote that says, again, as humans, we are conditioned to listen to stories. Even when we sleep at night, our brain stays up telling itself stories, which when you think about it, I'm like, goodness, this is profound and true. Like, our brain stays up, it's awake, and it's dreaming, it's telling itself stories.
And they became dreams.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that. I was just in Los Angeles. I saw Hillary out there, and I was driving through Culver City, and I was thinking, gosh, we are so invested in our stories and telling stories and showing our stories. I mean, we've got a city that was built
on storytelling,
right? It was incredible. Like, I drove by one of the old studios and thought about that.
This is how we best process information. I mean, you could argue. I mean, I think that there are some anthropologists that say that poetry is actually the most condensed way of conveying information, but stories are how we make sense of
the most condensed way of transmitting information that we retain, I think, is what it is about poetry.
Probably, yeah.
And then I would add to that music, because, like, you ever had to memorize something for school, like the lists of names and dates of what wars and what this and that treaties. If you could make it into a song, you'll remember it. Like, so that's another layer to it. I'm not saying you should send a song in for your MBA.
MBA. That's an interesting approach.
I mean, if it's catchy and you can dance to it, it might work.
Hey, I want to add one more just tiny little takeaway practical thing on the storytelling note. With regard to, I think Petia mentioned, like, the word "so what." It's funny you said that. We use the same wording, but it's like, please remember that they've read your resume now by this point when you're getting to the essays. They've read all the stuff that you submitted. So don't rewrite your resume into an essay. Like, know that they know what you've told them, and you could refer back to it briefly, like, given that I'm a CEO of etc., you can refer to it, but you don't have to tell them from scratch everything you've now written in the data form, so focus on you told them the what, this is what I did, what happened. Now just focus the whole essay on the so what. Like, why, what else do you need us to know? I know that's literally Harvard's question, but I think it's everybody's question. Like, what more do you want us to know? And often they'll give you a very specific prompt around it, but sometimes they don't. But it's all just, what else should we know, given that you've told us all these facts on a page? So, focus on that piece. Why should we know
Hillary.
this as it relates to your candidacy?
Yeah.
Thank you, Hillary. And as we wind down this episode, because we don't have that much time left, thinking about both the essay and the interview, let me ask the group this question. How unique do you have to be in order to stand out? Like, to what length do you want to go to be different?
Here's how I answer this question, because it's a question that candidates agonize over, right? And they're obsessed with, I know that I have to be unique. I know I have to differentiate, because we're sending that message to them, right? So it's a little bit of a self-inflicted thing. And I always tell them the chances are, if you tell people how you do things, the way you do things is going to be uniquely different than the way anyone else does things. So you may be doing the same job, you may be involved in the same community, some level of volunteering that someone else, but the way you're doing these things is uniquely yours. And of course, no one is going to have the exact same combination of work experience, extracurricular involvements. Somehow, like, the mix is always going to be different for people, but how you do it, why you do it, your thinking, your decision making behind it, there's just, if you give people insight into that, you're going to be unique, hands down.
Yeah, this is the reason why, you have 1,000 reels on how to scramble an egg, and they all still have use.
Yeah.
Also, too, not how you do it, but also for some people, it's more like what inspires you about that, like what drives you to do that, even if you do it the same way as someone else, but you're motivated by something else. So it's the past story or the future.
Absolutely.
I think about I think about this a lot, like an ingredient label. Again, I'm a consumer products girl at heart, but like you have to list everything on your ingredients label. Like you do, you're not gonna. Maybe it's not so differentiated that you took finance class, like everybody took that, but you know how you took it or what piece of finance you really care the most about. That's where your package might look different, or the copy on the label might look different. But your ingredients, just own it, like sell it, own it. And then use your label, your packaging, your written words to explain why your version of it is added value, and they should have both of you in the class.
Yep.
Love it. To wrap it up, why don't we go around the room? We'll give like one last bit of advice and like how you can make the most of your personal brand in terms of getting admitted to the MBA programs you're targeting. I can start.
Thinking.
I'll start. And I would say this. We talked about curation and being authentic. I would say know your audience, know the school, know their culture, and that will vary from school to school. Not only will you see that in the specific questions they ask in their essays, for example, but you should have done this at this point by the time you're actually applying to a school, have gone that deep and really have a good sense of what the culture is and who are the people. And so that would definitely help direct you in terms of how you curate your authenticity. That's what I got to say.
I'm thinking that, to make a puzzle work, you have all these individual puzzle pieces, but they create a whole picture. And so that as you're moving through it, think about how your puzzle piece is totally unique and has its own curvature and texture and color and form, but that you're going to be part of something that's bigger. I think I'm kind of paraphrasing a little bit of what we've been saying all along, but in order for that puzzle piece to really work, you're demonstrating how your unique self is going to be instrumental in making the cohesion throughout the whole thing. So it's that balance between individual and collective.
100%.
The way I think about it early on is that every really great MBA story starts with really asking yourself really great questions first, so that you can uncover what this uniqueness is about, what makes you tick. So I personally, when I work, and they're actually on my website, I ask candidates to ask themselves 7 questions. And they're questions that relate to your values, who shaped you, what inspires you, what's your biggest hope, your biggest fear, because both very often have something to do, especially professionally, with why you're thinking of getting an MBA. So lots of questions in the beginning.
Yep.
Substitutes for that.
That's what good coaches do. All right. Who else?
I'll go. I guess to put that into action, I suppose, if you ask yourself these questions and you're still stuck with, what is my unique point of differentiation? I feel like one of a dozen, and my own team, let alone the 15 other companies just like mine, then get help. Like, ask others. You ask a coach, ask your peers, ask friends, your mom, somebody that knows you. Look back at your annual reviews, like anything that helps you get a sense of how you're different versus your peers. Be aware of your opportunities to improve, but also recognize how you do stand out from peers, and use that and lean in on that, because there is room for 10, similar, let's just say, investment bankers or consultants on the same team to attend the same business school side by side and each add value. So if that comes from your professional annual review, great. But if it comes from your personal life, like, okay, fine, maybe I don't have tons at work that I can lean on, but I definitely have a totally different personal story, my upbringing, my hardships, my,
Takes a village.
Then lean on that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks,
And
Hillary.
last but not least, I had to say that the personal brand is not something that you have with you only at the time of admission. This is what is going to help you achieve that best MBA experience that you want for yourself, as well as that career that you wanted for yourself later. So it's just a starting point, and hence, like Petia said, spend a lot of time on the self-reflection that's needed in order to make what comes next better for you.
Love it. Love it. Thank you guys so much. I want to thank, first of all, my co-hosts, Bara and Krithika, and of course, our guests, Petia and Hillary, and all of you in the audience who watched live, and all of you who are watching the recording. That's all the time we have for this episode.
You just
We
wrapped
are
up
at 100.
100. Amazing.
Totally
I gotta
amazing.
say, I'm impressed.
And MBA Waves is a great brand now. This is how branding works, through consistency.
Oh, I remember how it was born.
We didn't see each other then. We were on
No,
a phone.
that's true. We started blind. It's like, oh, that's what you look like.
I think we zoomed.
That's your brand.
No, we started
All
on
right.
Clubhouse.
We started on Clubhouse, but we did Zoom. We had Zoom meetings.
Yes, we did.
True. Well, guys, that's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us. And don't forget to give us a like and subscribe to MBA Waves on YouTube. See you next week for another episode of MBA Waves talking about LinkedIn, using LinkedIn like a pro, episode 101. Happy 2-year anniversary, everyone. And thanks once again. Bye-bye.